Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate it. George and I appreciate it. What's been the response? We went to a Dallas premiere not too long ago. There were a lot of folks there, a lot of politicians. We had a Supreme Court, one of the Supreme Court justices was there, and some really high profile politicians. Anyway, what's been the response across the country so far?
Overall, people are very receptive to our film, We the Parents.
Mhm.
It's a look at family courts through the eyes of parents who've lived it. And I think a lot of times parents feel like they don't have a voice. And so seeing someone on screen telling their story that really resonates with the audience is has been very impactful for parents who've gone through it.
Mhm.
So the audience who's seen it, who has been through family court, are typically very receptive and very relieved to hear that one, they're not alone,
Mhm.
and that they're not crazy, that the system
Mhm.
really is destroying families. If you
Mhm.
haven't been through it, it's really hard to imagine that the
Yeah.
way the system is designed is to pit parents against each other. And so if you have family members who've not been through it, it's hard to believe that this could happen to good people, that there must be another side to the story, and that,
Mhm.
you know, if you lost your kids, there must have been a reason,
Mhm.
and that courts don't take kids for no reason. And so parents are relieved to see that they're not alone. First of all, so the reception has been very good on that side. But then there are some who have seen it who are in the legal field. So we have attorneys and judges, Supreme Court justices, in Ohio and in Texas that I know for sure, have seen it. And the feedback has been positive as well. I think the problems with family court really are obvious to common sense people. And so everyone is recognizing there's a problem, and where the disagreement is the approach to fixing the problem.
Mhm.
But generally speaking, people have been very positive in their feedback. In fact, the only negative feedback have been two things, the two
Mhm.
variations of the same ideas, which is that one, we didn't go far enough.
Mhm.
There are people who felt like we should have called out the corruption harder, stronger, that we should have gone deeper into issues like parental alienation, custody interference.
Mhm.
There are a lot of issues in CPS. We didn't even address CPS. So the film focuses on custody disputes between parents, because ultimately, if we don't have courts that recognize that both parents have a fundamental right to the care and custody of their
Mhm.
own children, then nothing else really matters, because parents are the foundation and the structure to a family. And so all those other issues are very important and we need to address them, but we have to first acknowledge that both parents are necessary in a child's life in order to raise happy, healthy, developmentally mature young adults.
Yeah, well said. And I was kind of curious. The film did a really great job. I feel like it really did a great job for what it was trying to do. It also being the first kind of its kind. But yes, the focus on equal shared parenting was interesting, and you kind of just articulated it. Was it hard to decide on the kind of focus on that? Because especially toward the end of the documentary, you really kept coming back to this idea that this is really the glaring fight that we need to be kind of working together on.
Yeah. Um, so when we first got involved in advocacy, I'll give a little bit of background about my husband
Mhm.
and I. So we were a blended family. We both came into our marriage with three children each. So we have six kids. And having been through divorce ourselves, we were able to witness firsthand how the system operates. But our experiences in family court were very different from one another. So I ended up with a 50-50 arrangement with my kid's dad. It took years, but at this point, we co parent very, very well. Two of our children are adults now, and we continue to co parent a special needs child. So custody and guardianship of our youngest will be forever. He's never just going to grow up.
Mhm.
So we have a really good working relationship at this point, but it wasn't like that in the beginning. And actually, when we had originally separated, we had decided we wanted to do it amicably, and then attorneys got involved and it dragged it out and it created conflict that was not there. We had conflict. We had a lot of personal conflict for sure. But the legal conflict wasn't there
Correct.
until we involved attorneys. So that was eye-opening for me because we went in with the intent to work it out. And it still took 2 years. And then my husband's experience, he was a victim of the silver bullet. He went 34 days without any contact with his children whatsoever, based solely on a statement from their mom that wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
And he's fared well now, as far as he has better than the standard visitation with his kids, but he doesn't have any decision making. He doesn't have final say, which ultimately means he can't make any decisions. And so his battle has been long, it's been painful, it's been very traumatic for the kids. And so we wanted to get involved in changing the system. So that's how we got involved a few years back. And initially it was just to meet up with people that are doing things across the country and get ideas. We didn't know what even the laws really were. Like, when we got into it, we were just as ignorant as anybody. We had no idea. But then the more you look into it and the more you research and the more you connect with people, you realize that this is a systemic problem. It's not just, this is a unique case. Like, attorneys and judges like to rely on this argument that all cases are different and you can't have a standard because every situation is different. And while that's true, we can't use that as an excuse to limit a fit and loving parent's contact with their child. And so we're severing parent-child relationships is what we're doing. And so we decided that we wanted to create a film because that explanation, that basic explanation of how things work, is what is missing from public discourse. Because the people who are loudest are people who've been through it, but there's a lot of emotion behind what they're doing. A lot of times they're still living it. And it's hard to hear what they're saying because these things they're saying sound so outrageous. And maybe they're very upset about it, as they should be. And it's hard to hear. It's hard to hear people going through it because it seems so crazy. So we wanted to kind of lay a foundation that people can understand that even if you've not been through it, it's kind of like a 101 course to custody.
If I
Go ahead, George, your turn.
I really like the movie because if you look at the other movies that have come before it, they all target. There's one for parental alienation. Divorce Corp obviously talks about the backdoor dealings, right? You have erasing families. You have this just fits to another piece of the puzzle, and all of these documentaries should be watched together. For everybody that's going through family court, because there's so many aspects just coming from the judicial ruling itself. And if you can't, and I tell this to a lot of people that are going through family court, if you can't expect justice, the right way, then how are you expecting justice by hiring attorneys and going through the litigation route? There has to be a balance. And there has to be judicial integrity. And if there's no judicial integrity, ultimately the people in the robes are and the officers of the court are hurting the children they're supposed to be protecting. So I think this film, and everybody should go and watch it. It's free on YouTube. There's absolutely no reason. If you're in family court, somebody in family court, somebody going through child custody, you need to make sure that they watch this film so that they know what they're getting themselves into.
This is the battle of our generation for us as adults and parents. And even if you're not involved in family court, if you care about this country, if you're civically engaged and you care about the role of families in our society, I would encourage you to watch it. Elizabeth, I wanted to ask you, you become like a national, I guess, I don't know if spokesperson is the right word, but you've made this a national issue of equal shared parenting time, which is really important. Some of the arguments that I've heard, attorneys use against this, and I'll even give an example, is at a bar at a hotel, talking to this family about this issue, and a bartender overheard it and made kind of a snide remark, which was really uninformed, but, he said, well, that's easy until, how's the kid going to go to two different schools? And of course, in the legal process, you would never expect that. It's not even possible. The parents would have to stay in one, school district. But there's some, misconceptions. Another one that I heard from an attorney, I'll let you, kind of address, is that children will be living out of their luggage. I think is kind of the
Yeah, their
analogy
suitcase. Yeah, their suitcase.
Yeah, there's gonna be a suitcase generation. What do you think about that, Elizabeth?
Yeah. I mean, the arguments in opposition to shared parenting are always the same. They
Mhm.
might have some slight nuances to them, but they're always the same arguments.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research that has been done into child well-being specifically related to shared parenting arrangements. We have over 40 years of research, actually.
Mhm.
And the research has consistently shown that when children spend equal or nearly equal time with both parents, that they fare better on every metric of child well-being, every
Mhm.
metric of child well-being, than children raised in a sole custody situation. So the most ideal situation is for parents to stay together. I mean, that's where children thrive the
Mhm.
best. I mean, there's no argument for that. That is, if we're talking about the best interest of the child, what's best for children is for parents to stay together, family units to stay together, and in a loving, healthy relationship, and they live together, they stay together. But that's not the world we live in. And so when they can't have the best, what is the next best thing? And research has shown that the next best thing is shared parenting. And shared parenting is equal time with both parents, and both parents having equal say, equal rights in the decisions for the child. And that's super, super important. So when people raise arguments against it, one, they are either ignorant of or flat out ignoring the research that
Mhm.
exists that supports a presumption of equal shared parenting. A lot of it is ignorance. It's based on old biases and old ideas from generations ago. The tender years doctrine, which is that children need a single primary caregiver, that doctrine was based on the 1950s. And that has also been debunked decades ago, that it's actually been
Mhm.
shown that children form attachment bonds to more than one caretaker if they have more than one caretaker in their life. So this idea that children only bond to one parent is just fallacious. So there is, emotionally speaking, there is no danger or
Mhm.
detriment to a child to enforce shared parenting for that child's bonds to both parents to be encouraged and allowed. First of all, when they talk about living out of a suitcase, I mean, even if you do the every other weekend arrangement, they're still living out of a suitcase, right?
Mhm.
Because there's still a
Oh yeah.
transition back and forth. And actually, if you have an unequal arrangement, and typically it's usually 25% to 75% of the time, the less time a parent has, usually they're shorter periods together, but they're more spread out. So there's actually more back and forth, more
Mhm.
exchanges happening when you have less time with your child. And there's no time for that child to adjust to that other home. So, like, if you get your child on a Wednesday night, you haven't seen them for a week, it might take them all evening to settle in, and then they're gone the next morning. So there's not even time for a child to adapt in that environment. So that is certainly not helping the argument of living out of a suitcase, right? If they have two
Mhm.
equal homes, they're not packing clothes back and forth because both parents have to provide for the child. They have to have clothes, they have to have things in each home in order to support a child half of the time. So there's actually less suitcasing back and forth. And listen, you're always going to have a backpack going back and forth, no matter if it's one home or two homes. So there are always going to be items going back and forth, just like they go to and from school with
Grandma,
items.
school, whatever. Yeah.
So that idea is just crazy. And especially when we have research that shows that that's not harmful for children,
Mhm.
that it's actually more harmful for a child's relationship with their parent to be minimized than the inconveniences of going back and forth between homes. So another argument against shared parenting is it's not appropriate in all cases. What if the parents live in different states? What if a parent doesn't want to? What if there's abuse? There are always exceptions. Okay,
Mhm.
there are always
Mhm.
exceptions to the rule, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have a standard to start from. Because if you don't have a standard to start from, and equality is the best place to start, if you ask me, if you don't have a standard to start from, then courts start wherever they want. So you're not going to help the situation with inconsistent rulings. It's going to go back once again to a stranger on the bench or stranger attorneys who don't know the child and are only representing the parents they represent to decide what's best for this child. And that's just not the way that I think we as a society should be parenting our children. We shouldn't be giving our children over to strangers to make these decisions for them.
Correct. Do we know how many states? I know is Kentucky, does that have equal shared parenting? And they say rebuttable. So most of these states, I think all these states have this word rebuttable.
All of them.
Rebuttable.
Yep.
Okay. So, do we know how many states total? It's not many.
Yeah, it's 6. So we have 6
Oh.
states in the United States that have a rebuttable presumption for equal shared parenting.
Okay.
Arkansas is the only one that also raised their standard of evidence. So in family courts, civil court, so family courts are, a branch of civil courts. So it's not criminal court. Criminal court, you have a lot more protections. There's a lot more rules. The judges have their discretion is very narrow on how they can adjudicate a case, right? In civil court, the evidentiary standard is very low. It's the lowest in all courts. And that is the preponderance of the evidence standard. And all that means is that when a court is looking at the evidence that's presented, they just have to decide,
51%,
more likely or
right.
not. Yeah,
right.
More likely or not. And that could be as little as, 1%. So the problem with that is in these types of cases, a lot of it is he said, she said. So there is not a lot of physical proof. Why are courts issuing decisions that are infringing on a parent's fundamental right to the care and custody of their children without actual physical evidence? The reason they're doing that, and they can do that, is because the evidentiary standard is the lowest standard you could possibly have in court. So you don't have to have physical evidence. A person's testimony is enough. And so then the court has to just choose who to believe. So Arkansas raised their standard of evidence to clear and convincing evidence. I think that's the way states need to go. I think a presumption of equality is where you want to start. But if you don't have the legal backing, 1, to keep courts accountable, and 2, to make sure that the evidence that's being presented to rebut that presumption is of good quality, then I don't know that it's going to have the impact that we're hoping to have. But there's a lot of things that we need to address. And to me, you just start with the idea that children need both parents. And by needing both parents, we don't mean they just need to see one of the parents 6 days a month. Like that's not what children need. When we say children need their parents, we mean they need their parents as part of their day-to-day life.
I was going to say all of that as well.
Do you plan on addressing some other issues in the future? Money is such a huge thing. The amount of money that flows through, even just looking at, why do fathers only gain, primary custody in Texas, George? What is it? Sometimes as low as 6% of the time. It's
94.6. We pulled the numbers. Yeah, we pulled the numbers from the Texas Attorney General, and 94% of the time, the moms are the custodial parents, or the dad, or the non-custodial parents, however you want to put it. But 94% of the time, the father's going to have to pay child support, and he'll see Johnny first, third, and fifth Fridays. And it's heartbreaking because a lot of these men are trying, and women too. There's a lot of advocates that are trying to be in their lives of their children. They're going to law libraries. They're looking up research. They're actively educating themselves and assembling with other advocacy groups just to be a parent. And the judiciary is the one that's running interference, and then kind of dangling the carrot, right? Dangling the child in front of both parents and saying, who wants the child more? And what are you going to do about it? And sir, go hire an attorney if you want, for me to hear you correctly. I mean, we live in 2024. There's absolutely no reason why some of these most basic standards and research should not be included in the judicial ruling. And Ms. McNeese is absolutely correct, as far as the standard of proof. The preponderance of evidence here in Texas, I think in 3 legislative sessions ago, they were trying to change the standard to clear and convincing. And of course, the lawyers that from the state bar all jumped on it because they love the discretionary part of preponderance of evidence, because it allows the judge to sway either way. The judge just has to find 51% of one person's favor for them to make a ruling. And
I
it's
kind of hear, yeah, I kind of hear it described as the judge in family courts. They're inclined to pick winners and losers, because once you have a loser, you can levy that person, usually a father with child support. And in Tarrant County, I've done an open records request, and they make $3 million a year on enforcement of child support. And across this, that's just one family court, building in Texas. So across the state, you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars that's generated through child support for the state. And I think that's one of the top complaints people have is how unfair child support is administered. There's no transparency. It really financially cripples fathers. Where I can speak for myself. I paid child support for 2 children, and at different times I've been unable to afford an attorney to fight false allegations. And it's like the system's kind of almost designed to just break parents. But Elizabeth, if the states across the country adopt equal shared custody, is there going to be less of any kind of justification for child support? I'm sure there are going to be some, but is it going to be harder for courts to justify, levying child support when both parents are sharing in child rearing equally?
Well, I think it's important to know that every state does child support differently. Texas is one of the worst, if not the worst, in the country. You guys don't even have a time sharing option at all in your calculator. Most states have some sort of time sharing calculation that's factored in there. So more equal time would equal less child support in those states that have a time sharing model. Texas doesn't. So unless you change the laws on child support in Texas, I don't see why a 50-50 arrangement would impact child support based on Texas laws right now, because you guys don't even take into account time in the first place by calculator.
Well, and a lot of people will talk about child support, and I keep telling people, y'all need to start waking up and look at the protective orders and the supervised visits and the battery intervention classes, because that's what they're doing. They know they're losing the war on child support. People are getting educated. People are talking about it. And so now what they're doing is, just like you said, Eddie, they're trying to make a winner and a loser. And so now they're subjecting these parents with no evidence at all, just like Miss McNeese was saying. There's no evidence at all, and they're subjecting these parents to go to these supervised visitations based on false allegations. There's no admonishments. There's no what I'd say is there's no reporting mechanism for false allegations, because they let them run rampant in family court. Everybody knows that it's perjury palace, and everybody knows, and it's accepted. And it's the parent and ultimately the child that's losing that other parent because of these business practices from these attorneys. And you have good attorneys. You have great judges. But the thing is, they don't correct the perversion of their profession. They see it and they look the other way, or they're scared. They don't want to cause issues with their bar card. And it's really a gross, profession, and it's hurting all of our children.
Elizabeth, you have a national perspective. So we were chatting before the interview, but how does Texas stand out? You say we have a lot of kind of loud, vocal family court reform advocates. I like to hear that.
So Texas is one of those states where you do have a lot of very vocal and reputable people there that are advocating for court reform. You have groups that are doing it different ways, and you have a plethora of options if you're wanting to become an advocate or get involved and you want to do it a certain way. Like, there are so many different groups. There's got to be a group there that is doing that would work for you. But what's really special about Texas is, so since the film came out, We the Parents Texas has come up. And I did not create We the Parents Texas. I my husband and I produced the film, but We the Parents, but we do not run We the Parents Texas. So what Texas did is groups got together, organizations and people got together and said, you know what, we are going to take this film and we are going to run all through Texas and we're going to show it, and we're going to have panelists come, experts, we're going to have attorneys come, we're going to have judges come, we're going to have advocates come, parents, and we're going to brainstorm and we're going to talk about the issues, and we're going to go farther than the film goes. We're going to use the film as a springboard, but then we're going to go into real hardcore conversations and really come up with ideas on how we can fix this in Texas for our state. So Texas is very special because not only do you have a lot of advocates and you have a lot of different types of organizations, but they're working together. You're working together. And I think you guys are going to be at the forefront of national change because you're doing what so many other states are still struggling to do, which is getting the numbers and getting the advocates to work together.
That's heartening. I'm really glad to hear that, and I hope other states can do the same. We all have to be kind of have a grassroots mentality, and then work within your city, and then work within your county, then connect with other counties within your state, and then like we're doing right now, connect with other people across the country is the ultimate goal, so that we're all working together on this unified front.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of people who are advocates are traumatized themselves because they became advocates because they went through it or they watched someone go through it. And so it's very personal. And unfortunately, that also means that if you're not a healed person, you bring a lot of trauma into your advocacy. And so that might make you paranoid about other people in the movement who are maybe doing things a different way, or might make you feel like you can't trust people. And sometimes we self-sabotage when you're dealing with trauma. And I do believe most of us, if not all of us, who've gone through family court are dealing with some sort of trauma and hurt and pain from that. And so if we can find a way to set that aside and channel that in a positive way, instead of attacking people who are allies, even if they're doing things maybe a way you wouldn't do, that's okay. Like, I think one thing that is missing from our movement for court reform is we really got to find ways to lock arms with the domestic violence people. For instance, they consider themselves staunch opponents to shared parenting, but because their preconceived notions of what we're saying is so in depth in them, they are missing the fact that victims of domestic violence are often victims of false allegations. They're often victims of attorneys abusing the courts in the system in litigation against the other parent. So the problem is the system. The problem is the laws, and the problem is the industry, the family law industry that has been built up around the conflict, the natural conflict from when people end a relationship. That's a naturally conflicting, emotional, hard time, and they're capitalizing on people's trauma. And so if we can really, really be honest with ourselves and identify the real root of the problem, I think that we can push this even further.
I met you and I met Eddie in Dallas last month, and for the premiere. And, me and Eddie met through this movement, and now we're, I guess, got a podcast going. But I did some interviews after the movie, and I talked to a whole bunch of people, and a lot of them said, this movie hurt. This movie I watched and I was drawn to tears. There was one man that said that he doesn't cry very much, but he was moved very early in the movie, and it was so real. And that's what I think we need more of. Is there's a lot of parents that are scared to come out. A lot of parents, and I talked to somebody else last night about mental health. And you're absolutely right. We're all damaged. We all have some sort of PTSD from fighting this, but we can't ask for help because it's going to be used against us in court. And when movies like this come out, right, it gives reassurance that, hey, buddy, you're not alone. I know what you went through because I'm going through it as well. The false allegations, the, just being berated in family court, I understand where you're coming from. And so that's why I love this movie. Is because, you know, it has a real sense of feeling to the movie. And people were, and this wasn't just one individual, it wasn't two, it wasn't three. There were multiple parents that came out, and there were even some that weren't parents, that were just wanting to see a documentary movie that night and saw that it was on, and they just showed up. There was two men that had no iron in this family court fire that I interviewed, and they were shocked by the things that are happening in family court. So the awareness, putting this movie out, this is why I advocate for this movie. This is why I tell everybody to share it. Um, Anybody that's going through divorce court needs to see this family court, because it brings a sense of a realism. And like Miss McNeese said earlier, unless you're going through it, you really don't understand it and you really don't believe it. It's that flagrant in family court.
Yeah.
You know, George, if let's end on a topic that we can explore this, and I know Elizabeth has a lot to do, so we can kind of just make this the closing topic. But you touched on judicial retaliation, and you've been the victim of this. We've seen a lot of people who are afraid to go to family court, either to court watch or to even speak up for themselves, because they'll literally be thrown in jail for absolutely no reason. And, you know, God forbid you have a reputation for being someone who speaks publicly and, you know, asserts your First Amendment rights. Then the judge will just terminate your parental rights, and you will have, you know, you'll lose access to your child. And you've experienced this. And to some extent, you know, I've had to deal with that with Jesse Navarez. There's a level of fear out there with that's very real. And I think a lot of the people who maybe want to be a part of this movement are either too battered and destroyed to do it, financially destroyed, or they're just in fear for their safety or in fear for having access to their children, because these judges are incredibly vindictive.
So, and this is something that advocates have taught me. I've taught others. I don't know who started it. If I had to give credit, I'd give it to Jeff Morgan. Jeff Morgan always says, "Friends don't let friends go to anti-family court alone." And forever, I've been in court for the last 7 years, and I have always rallied people to come with me. Not only does it give me a sense of protection when I have that many eyes on my case, right? But you motivate, and motivation and education is something I hit on a lot. I would rather motivate and educate somebody opposed to telling them how to do certain things, because like Miss McNeese said earlier, some people do things a certain way. Some people are a little bit more passive, some people are a little bit more aggressive. I'm on the aggressive part. And you know, when you go to court, you're going there to conduct business in the best interest of the child. And if you have judges that are seeking some sort of retaliatory measures because you're voicing out or you're using your First Amendment to talk about the family courts, and you're educating. And some of it's, you know, when I bring court watchers, and hey man, what did you see with the judge? You know, did you see any types of disturbing behavior? And Jeff Morgan, Taryn Champagne, a lot of these advocates that are seasoned have court watch for me, and we've been able to see attorneys coaching the client on Zoom. We've seen the judges have ex parte on Zoom. And so when COVID happened and we put everything on Zoom, they weren't ready for this. They weren't ready for the public to start assembling together and start educating and identifying the patterns, the abusive patterns and the business practices of these lawyers and judges. And now, like we're talking about earlier, is getting with your certain groups, advocacy groups within your state. And I think it's very important, whether it's your advocacy group, their advocacy group, it doesn't matter. You need to associate with an advocacy group, and you need to take parents with you to family court, because if you don't, they're going to railroad you all day long by yourself. The more eyes, the better. And identify the patterns. Identify the patterns and start educating people to this. It's just like football. They're going to run this play, or look for this defense, look for this offense.
Decisions in family court. They always know what they're going to do before they hear them. Yeah.
Right. So the more eyes, the better. And again, this movie, I can't overemphasize it. It gets down to the nitty gritty. It gets down. I've seen some documentaries where they kind of skate around it and they want to talk about other topics. We know it abuses children. Okay, let's start educating. This is how it's abusing children. And this is something the movie does. Hey guys, when you go to family court, this is what you can expect. Blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah. I would add, as far as court oversight and accountability amongst their ranks, it's very hard if you are one of the judges who is a good person who sees it for what it is, and is trying to do the right thing. I don't think it's fair to say that all judges are bad, or all judges have financial gain in this, or same with attorneys. We do have allies, but the problem is they eat their own when they speak up. So an experience that I had here in Ohio, I've been doing legislative advocacy for our equal parenting bill in Ohio. So I've talked to a lot of judges about this topic. And we actually had a magistrate helping us with our language. And she made the mistake of asking a judge that she really admired and has worked very close with over the years for advice. And when she did that, she got reprimanded. And I got a frantic phone call from her pulling out of helping us, that she said that she's worried about her career because she's a magistrate. So she's appointed by a judge, so she's not elected. So she could lose her job tomorrow if the judge wanted to fire her. It wasn't her direct judge even that she reached out to. It was another judge that she was close to. So she had to back out of helping us in something she believed very strongly about, and she was trying to help us with the language. So, to think that there are judges who are good who can't speak up without losing their jobs, that's scary. And that's the reality of the world that we live in. When we were interviewing people for the documentary, there are not as many women in it as we had hoped. And we had tried really hard to get more women in there. It was hard to get women to talk. It was hard to get women to commit. I'm in it, but only because one of the women that we interviewed backed out afterwards and said, please don't put me in there. So I had to fill the holes.
Well, I know a lot of women here in Texas that are ready to sound off if y'all do another one. Yeah, there's a lot of women here that are ready.
Yeah. I think that this film has definitely encouraged people to come out. We started filming this 3 years ago. So our connections today are not what they were when we set out. In fact, when we set out, we didn't think this would go anywhere. We were just trying to do something that we felt needed to be done, even if no one ever watched it. We were just doing it because we wanted to. It was a passion project of my husband and I's. We have no ulterior motives. We have no financial gain or gain of any kind from the film. In fact, we've lost a lot of money into the film. So we just feel like it's something that is needed and that we chose to do. And it took 3 years to finish it as a side project, but here we are.
It's a beautiful gift you've given the parents of this country and to the children of this country. I want to just commend you for that.
And I want to expound on the gift part because it is a very, very useful tool and resource for parents to come out and start talking about the corruption in their family courts. And again, everything about me is about educating and showing and being able to identify the patterns of abuse in the business practices. And just like Eddie said, this is a gift. And this is why I tell everybody, hey, what would you do for your kids? What would you do for your kids? Let me ask again, what would you do for your kids? Would you take 50 minutes out of your time to watch this documentary so you get the leg up and you understand what's going to happen to you in family court? Watch this movie. If you want to fight for your children, this is one of the first things you need to do is watch this movie and know what you're getting yourself into. Quit going to an attorney, dropping $5,000 and saying, get my child back, because that's not realistically what's going to happen. Watch this movie, educate yourself, share it with others, and get others' input, and then come up with a plan and move forward. So yes, this is a tool. It is a gift. And I'm very thankful for this movie.
Thank you. I would add that if you are going through it, show it to your ex. I think a lot of conflict can be resolved if we really understand the value of shared parenting, and that you can still hate your ex and still co-parent. And that co-parenting doesn't mean you're best friends, right? There's this misconception that you can only do shared parenting if you really get along with your ex, and that's just not true. I'm living proof of that. You can do parallel parenting where you're really not exchanging a whole lot of information. It's just the necessary information, and very little contact. That works too. But your kids need you, regardless of whatever your relationship is with your ex. So I would encourage people, if you're in it, if you're really in it, try and get your ex to watch it too. And maybe you can come to a resolution. One of the dads in the film said, listen, you're better off staying out of court. And that's the truth. You are better off working it out together, because it doesn't matter how much you're paying your attorney. They're in it to win. They're not in it for your kids. And if you're in it for your kids, you probably should try and go without going through the court system and the system that we have, because it's not conducive.
Yeah, and you're your biggest advocate for your children. Your lawyer is going to go to sleep at night. He's going to get rest. He's going to go and play golf the next morning. You're your biggest advocate for your children, so you know your case better than anybody. And another thing I like to tell people is that especially if your child is young and you get a divorce at an early age, or the child's early age, you need to know the simple basics of law, how to file, what to look for, because you're going to have these issues. If you have a high conflict parent, you're going to have these issues for the rest of the child's duration on that court order. So you have to make it a hobby. You just like going to bowling on Wednesdays. You have to set some time to study and be able to show up for your child in court. So yes, I agree with both of y'all about this. I mean, this is such a great film, and I can't stop talking about it, to be honest with you.
Well, I hope people will share this. So it's on YouTube, so it's just a video link, right? Send it to your legislators. Okay. So the thing that people don't understand about legislators is, if they have 50 people coming to them saying, oh my gosh, you would not believe what happened to me in family court, that'll resonate with them, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, this is a problem. But the very first thing they're going to do is go to their local judge in their district, and they're going to say, hey, I'm getting a lot of parents telling me these crazy stories. And the judges and the attorneys have very high paid lobbyists who live at your state house to lobby in their interests. They are being told over and over and over that these are extreme cases, that these parents are they're difficult, and these are case by case crazy cases. And, it's not the system that's a problem, it's the parents that are the problem. And so send this film to your legislators, schedule meetings. I actually know someone who scheduled an hour meeting with their legislator and took their laptop to play the movie to make sure that they watched it. So, I mean, get creative, but make sure they see this, because whether they choose to act on it or not, that's like secondary, because we need to hold them accountable to what they've seen and what they know. And what they don't know is going to hurt us.
Well, you gave us, beyond being a gift, it's a tool. So from that point of view, let's use this tool, everybody. Well, any last questions, George? We want to respect her time and just.
No, everybody that's watching, I appreciate you guys coming in. I know it's being shared from my page and opposed to Eddie's, and we're going to try to fix that. But We the Parents Texas is a page that has been developed by multiple advocates in the Texas area, and they are promoting the showing of the movie. And I just want to go over that in closing, is that they're February 4th, and I want to get this right, so let me just pull it up. But February 4th is the next showing, and that event will be in the Dallas area. It's going to be at Look In Dine In Cinema. You can get with Dr. Brooks McKenzie or Jennifer Lundy for that event. And then the next event is going to be February 9th in Lewisville, Texas at 6 p.m. Again, you can get with Dr. Brooks or Jennifer Lundy. They're setting everything up for that showing. But check it out. If you're in North Texas, go to these events if you're watching, and find somebody that's like-minded or going through the same thing, and start making your group, be friends with them, watch the movie, talk about your issues, and then have a battle buddy when you go to family court. So those are 2 more showings that are showing in North Texas. We're going to try to get more showings throughout the state. Get involved, share, watch. Even if you've seen it, go back and rewatch it again, and go to these viewings, definitely, because there's so much to learn. You have Supreme Court justices that are showing up. You have Court of Appeals justices that are showing up. You have reporters. You have the Dr. Phil show that's showing up. All of these people are ready to make change, and you're not going to do anything if you just go in there by yourself and try to do it yourself. You have to assemble. You have friends. Don't let friends go to anti-family court alone. That's my saying for the afternoon. Love you guys. Eddie, you can close this out.
Actually, I want to just let Elizabeth have the last word. She's such a special guest, and I want to just say on behalf of all the parents in Texas, I know and was watching, this, we appreciate what you've done in Ohio for the country. But you have the last word, please, Elizabeth.
Watch the film, share the film. I mean, it is a tool. That's the intent of it. If you're one of those people who feels like it didn't go far enough, that it didn't call out the corruption enough, that we weren't hard enough on judges, use it.
Mm-hmm.
Use it. Do a screening and then talk about how things are even beyond what was in the film. Because that doesn't hurt my feelings at all. Like, say, look, yeah, you think that's bad? That ain't even nothing. They didn't even touch the surface. I'm totally fine with that. So use it as a tool in whatever way you can possibly use it. I think the more we get people talking about this, the more our lawmakers are aware of it. Something's got to give. And we want to keep that pressure on. And it's got to come from the people. It's got to come from the people. And if we're not united, it's not going to happen.
One more last question before we let you go. Inquiring minds want to know, will there be We the Parents too?
I know everybody wants to know that. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot, obviously, still to cover.
Well, if y'all do, good luck. We'll get with us. We'll keep pushing that one as well. Y'all are doing some great work, and we love you guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Eddie, what do we do now?
You press stop record.
All right. Well, thanks guys for tuning in. Until next time, hope you enjoyed it. Share it, watch it. We'll see y'all later. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.